Open this door right now or I'm breaking it down.
Can you first tell me what this is about?
We got a call about a disturbance. You need to step outside.
A disturbance? I'm a nurse. I just worked a double shift. I've been asleep for 2 hours.
Ma'am, last warning. Open up or you're getting arrested.
The doorbell camera was recording everything, every aggressive demand, every word, every violation of protocol that would cost Officer Bradley Mitchell his badge, his pension, and his freedom. He had no idea that the exhausted nurse on the other side of the door had just finished saving 3 lives in the ICU and was about to end his career without even getting out of her pajamas. At exactly 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday night in downtown Seattle, what should have been a routine wellness check turned into a federal case that would expose a decade of falsified reports, lead to criminal charges, and prove that sometimes the person you're trying to intimidate knows more about the law than you do. This wasn't just another video of police misconduct. This was an ER trauma nurse with 15 years of experience dealing with violent situations, going up against an officer who thought he could lie his way through anything. What happened next would shock an entire police department and show that body cameras work both ways. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and smash that subscribe button because this story gets wild and you don't want to miss what happens next. Danielle Moore was 43 years old and looked exhausted because she had just finished a brutal 16-hour shift at Seattle Grace Medical Center, one of the busiest trauma centers on the West Coast. Danielle was an ER nurse who specialized in critical care, the kind of nurse who could keep someone alive with failing organs while coordinating with 5 doctors and teaching 2 residents at the same time. She had seen things that would give most people nightmares: gunshot wounds, stabbings, car accidents where entire families came through the doors, drug overdoses, suicide attempts, every kind of human tragedy and medical emergency imaginable. As a Black woman in emergency medicine, she had also learned to navigate situations where people questioned her authority or expertise, even with 15 years of experience and a wall full of certifications. Danielle had worked in emergency medicine for 15 years. Before that, she had been a combat medic in the Army, deployed twice to Iraq, where she treated wounded soldiers under fire. She had a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart from her service. She knew how to stay calm when everyone around her was panicking. She knew how to make life or death decisions in seconds. But more relevant to what was about to happen, Danielle had spent 3 years working as a forensic nurse examiner. She had testified in court dozens of times. She had been trained in evidence collection, chain of custody, documentation procedures, and how to present medical findings to juries. She knew how law enforcement was supposed to operate because she had worked alongside police, prosecutors, and defense attorneys for years. Danielle lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. It was a quiet building, mostly young professionals and older residents who kept to themselves. She had lived there for 7 years without any problems. No noise complaints, no disputes with neighbors, nothing. On this particular Thursday night in November, Danielle had worked the 3 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, except it had run long because 2 trauma cases came in right at shift change. By the time she got home, it was 9:15 p.m. She took a shower, ate some leftover pasta, and collapsed into bed around 9:45. She was in that deep, dreamless sleep that comes from complete physical and mental exhaustion when loud pounding on her door jolted her awake. Boom, boom, boom. Danielle's eyes snapped open. Her training kicked in before her brain fully processed what was happening. She checked the time on her phone, 11:28 p.m. She had been asleep for less than 2 hours. The pounding continued, louder, more aggressive. Boom, boom, boom. Police opened the door. Danielle got out of bed, still in her pajamas, a simple t-shirt, and cotton pants. Her mind was running through possibilities. Wrong apartment, emergency in the building. She hadn't done anything wrong. She literally just got home from saving lives. She walked to her front door and looked through the peephole. She saw a police officer in full uniform standing in the hallway. He looked angry. His body language was aggressive. Weight forward, hand near his weapon. Danielle didn't open the door. Years of working in emergency medicine had taught her to assess situations before acting. Something felt wrong. "What's this about?" she called through the door. "Open this door right now or I'm breaking it down," the officer shouted. "Can you first tell me what's this about?" "We got a call about a disturbance. You need to step outside." Danielle's mind went into analytical mode. A disturbance? She had been asleep. Her apartment was silent. No TV, no music, no guests, nothing. A disturbance? "I'm a nurse. I just worked a double shift. I've been asleep for 2 hours. Ma'am, last warning. Open up or you're getting arrested." This is where most people would have opened the door. The authority in the voice, the threat of arrest, the uniform. Most people comply even when something doesn't feel right. Danielle wasn't most people. Officer, I'm not opening my door without knowing what this is about. What disturbance? Who called? What apartment number did they report? Silence from the other side of the door. Then the sound of the officer's radio crackling. Danielle grabbed her phone and did 3 things quickly. First, she started recording audio. Second, she opened her doorbell camera app. She had installed it 6 months ago for package deliveries and had forgotten about it until now. The live feed showed Officer Bradley Mitchell standing right outside her door, his face clearly visible, his aggressive body language unmistakable. Third, she texted her neighbor across the hall, an attorney named Ryan. Police at my door, aggressive, claiming disturbance call, I was asleep, recording everything on my doorbell cam. Can you hear this? Ryan responded immediately. I hear him. He's shouting. My doorbell camera sees him too, recording. Be careful. Quick question for you watching. Would you open the door if a cop was this aggressive but wouldn't explain why? Type yes or no in the comments. The officer pounded on the door again. Open this door now. Danielle kept her voice calm and clear, projecting toward the door so her phone would capture everything. Officer, I'm happy to cooperate, but I need to understand what's happening. Can you tell me your name and badge number? You don't need my badge number. You need to open this door. Actually, Washington state law says I have the right to know who's making contact with me. Can you please identify yourself? The officer's voice changed. It got quieter, more threatening. Ma'am, if you don't open this door in 5 seconds, I'm going to assume you're destroying evidence and I'm coming in. Evidence of what? I was asleep. I'm a nurse at Seattle Grace. I just got home from a 16-hour shift. There's no disturbance here. 5, 4. Danielle made a decision. She called 911. The dispatcher answered, 911, what's your emergency? This is Danielle Moore at the Meridian Apartments on East Pine Street, apartment 312. There's a police officer at my door threatening to break it down. He says there was a disturbance call but won't explain what it's about. I was asleep. I'm asking him for his badge number and he's refusing. Can you verify this call and tell me what's happening? The dispatcher sounded confused. Hold on, ma'am. The pounding stopped. The officer must have heard her on the phone through the door. After about 30 seconds, the dispatcher came back on. Ma'am, I'm not showing any disturbance calls to your address tonight. Can you describe the officer? Male, white, looks like he's in his 30s, average build. He's in full Seattle PD uniform. He's in the hallway outside my apartment right now. Ma'am, I'm going to connect you with a supervisor. Stay on the line. Danielle heard the officer's radio through the door. He was talking to someone, but she couldn't make out the words. A new voice came on Danielle's phone. This is Sergeant Williams with Seattle PD. Can you tell me what's going on? Danielle explained everything. The pounding on her door, the threats to break it down, the claim about a disturbance, the refusal to identify himself, the countdown, all of it. Sergeant Williams sounded concerned. Ma'am, I need you to ask the officer for his last name and badge number again. I'm going to stay on the line. Danielle called through the door. Officer, I have Seattle Police Sergeant Williams on the phone right now. He's asking for your identification. Long silence. Then the officer spoke, and his voice was completely different now. Uncertain, almost scared. This is Officer Bradley Mitchell, badge number 7429. Danielle repeated it into her phone for the sergeant. Sergeant Williams said something Danielle didn't expect. Miss Moore, Officer Mitchell is not assigned to your area tonight. He's not supposed to be in Capitol Hill at all. I'm sending units to your location right now. Do not open your door. Not for Officer Mitchell, not for anyone, until you see me personally. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Danielle heard the officer's footsteps moving away from her door quickly. She looked at her phone, the doorbell camera app still open showing the live feed. She watched Officer Bradley Mitchell walk rapidly down the hallway, his face visible the entire time, clearly aware he had made a terrible mistake. Her doorbell camera had captured everything from the moment he approached her door. What just happened? Danielle stayed on the line with Sergeant Williams. She watched through her doorbell camera app. Within 6 minutes, 3 police cars arrived. She saw Sergeant Williams and 4 other officers enter the building through the lobby camera feed. There was a knock on her door. Professional, not aggressive. Miss Moore? This is Sergeant Williams. I'm here with 3 other officers. Can you look through your peephole and verify it's us? Danielle looked. 4 officers, all with name tags visible. Sergeant Williams held up his badge to the peephole. She opened the door. Sergeant Williams was a black man in his 50s, with gray at his temples, and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything. He looked at Danielle in her pajamas, clearly just woken up, and his expression was sympathetic. Miss Moore, "I apologize for what just happened. Can you tell me everything from the beginning?" Danielle walked them through it. The pounding, the threats, the refusal to explain, the countdown, the 911 call. She showed them her phone with the audio recording. She opened her Doorbell camera app and showed them the video footage. Crystal clear video of Officer Bradley Mitchell at her door, his face fully visible, his aggressive body language captured from the beginning of the encounter. She showed them the text exchange with her neighbor Ryan. Ryan opened his door and came out. He was a white man in his late 30s, wearing a hoodie and sweatpants. He had his phone in his hand. "I got it on my Doorbell camera too," Ryan said. "Different angle, audio and video." The officer never identified himself properly. He made threats. He was aggressive from the start, and I can tell you for a fact that there was no disturbance. I was home all evening. This hallway was silent until he started pounding on Danielle's door. Sergeant Williams took both their contact information. He looked genuinely troubled. "Miss Moore, did Officer Mitchell say why he was here? Did he mention a specific complaint or caller?" "He said there was a disturbance call, but when I called 911, dispatch said there was no call to this address." Sergeant Williams looked at the other officers with him. One of them, a younger woman, was shaking her head in disbelief. "I need to ask you something, and please be honest. Do you know Officer Mitchell? Have you had any prior contact with him?" "No, I've never seen him before tonight." "Any disputes with neighbors? Any complaints filed against you? Anything that might explain why an officer would come to your door?" "Nothing. I work, I sleep, I'm barely home. I've lived here 7 years without any problems." Sergeant Williams nodded slowly. "Miss Moore, I'm going to be direct with you. This is very serious. An officer who's not assigned to this area showed up at your door with no call for service, refused to properly identify himself, and made threats to force entry. That's not police procedure. That's not legal. Something is very wrong here. Do you think the sergeant already knew this was going to be bad? Type yes in the comments." What Sergeant Williams didn't tell Danielle that night was that Officer Bradley Mitchell had been under quiet investigation for 6 months. The department had received 3 anonymous complaints from women who claimed Mitchell had shown up at their homes late at night, always alone, always when they were home alone, always with vague claims about disturbance calls that dispatch had no record of. But the women had been too scared to make formal complaints. They gave statements anonymously and refused to go on record. Without victims willing to testify, internal affairs couldn't move forward. They had been watching Mitchell, reviewing his patrol logs, looking for patterns, but they needed evidence. Danielle had just given them evidence, with audio recording, with video from her doorbell camera showing Mitchell's face clearly, with a witness in Ryan, with a 911 call that proved there was no disturbance, with everything documented and time-stamped. Sergeant Williams collected Danielle's phone number and email. He told her someone from Internal Affairs would contact her within 24 hours. He asked her to download the doorbell camera footage and send it along with the audio recording and any other documentation she had. Then he told her something else. "Miss Moore, I want you to know that you did everything right tonight. You stayed calm. You asked questions. You documented everything. You called 911. You protected yourself without escalating the situation. A lot of people would have opened that door, and I think you might have been in danger if you had." Danielle felt a chill go down her spine. "What do you mean? I can't say more right now, but I'm very glad you kept that door closed." The officers left. Danielle locked her door, checked every window, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, a detective from the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit called her. Not Internal Affairs, SACA Unit. That's when Danielle learned the full story. Officer Bradley Mitchell had been a Seattle police officer for 11 years. He had an unremarkable record, no major commendations, no serious complaints, just an average cop doing average work. But 6 months ago, a woman had reported to SCA unit that she had been sexually assaulted by a police officer who came to her apartment late at night claiming there was a disturbance call. She let him in. He assaulted her. She reported it immediately, but she couldn't identify which officer it was. She had been too traumatized to remember his face clearly, and he had kept his badge turned away from her. Then 2 more women came forward with similar stories. Late night visits, claims of disturbance calls, forced entry into their homes, assaults. But again, the women couldn't positively identify the officer. SACA unit had been working with Internal Affairs to identify potential suspects. They had narrowed it down to 3 officers based on patrol patterns and shift schedules. Bradley Mitchell was one of them, but they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest or even to search his patrol records more thoroughly. They needed something concrete. Danielle had given them that concrete evidence. Mitchell had come to her apartment with no call for service. He had tried to force entry. He had refused to identify himself properly, and it was all documented on her doorbell camera with his face clearly visible. The detective asked Danielle if she would be willing to make a formal statement and potentially testify. Danielle said yes immediately. Within 48 hours, the department had enough to get a warrant for Mitchell's patrol car computer, his personal phone, and his home computer. What they found was devastating. Mitchell had been using the patrol database to look up women who lived alone. He would search for addresses with single female residents, usually in their late 20s to early 40s, usually living in apartments without doormen or heavy security. He had been doing this for at least 3 years. His patrol car's Jeep's logs showed he had visited dozens of these addresses while off duty, always late at night, always in unmarked clothes, but with his badge and weapon. They found photos on his phone, photos of women through windows, photos of apartment building entrances, notes about their schedules. It got worse. They found recordings. Mitchell had been wearing a hidden camera during some of his late night visits. He had recorded himself assaulting women. The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying. Bradley Mitchell was arrested at his home on a Monday morning. He was charged with 3 counts of rape in the first degree, 5 counts of burglary with sexual motivation, 8 counts of stalking, and multiple counts of official misconduct and abuse of authority. The case made national news, not just because of what Mitchell had done, but because of how Danielle's documentation had broken the case open. Danielle's audio recording was played at the preliminary hearing. The doorbell camera footage was entered as evidence. Clear video showing Mitchell's face, his aggressive posture, his threats, everything. Ryan's doorbell camera video from across the hall corroborated everything from a second angle. The 911 call with dispatch proved there was no legitimate reason for Mitchell to be at Danielle's door. The prosecutor called it the clearest example of predatory behavior by a police officer that she had ever seen. But Danielle wasn't done. She filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Seattle Police Department. Not for money, though that would come later. For accountability. Her lawsuit alleged that the department had failed to properly investigate the earlier complaints against Mitchell, that they had allowed him to continue patrolling while under investigation, that their policies for handling sexual assault allegations against officers were inadequate, that they had failed to protect the public. The lawsuit was filed in the Western District of Washington. It was 68 pages long and included expert testimony from law enforcement professionals, forensic evidence specialists, and civil rights attorneys. Danielle's attorney was one of the best civil rights lawyers in Seattle, and she took the case pro bono because she believed in it. The city tried to fight it at first. They argued that they had been investigating Mitchell, that they had followed proper procedures, that they couldn't have known he was a predator without evidence. But Danielle's attorney destroyed those arguments. She showed that 3 women had come forward with nearly identical stories months before Danielle's incident. She showed that the department had done minimal follow-up. She showed that Mitchell's database searches had been logged and should have raised red flags. She showed that the department's own policies required more aggressive investigation of sexual assault allegations against officers. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found in Danielle's favor on every count. The jury awarded her $575,000 in damages. More importantly, the judge ordered the Seattle Police Department to implement sweeping reforms to how they handle allegations of sexual misconduct by officers. Do you think $575,000 was enough? Let me know in the comments. But the real impact came from what Danielle did with the money. She kept $50,000 to cover her legal expenses and time off work during the trial. The rest, $525,000, she donated to 3 organizations. $200,000 went to the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center, which provides free counseling and support to survivors. $150,000 went to a legal aid organization that helps low-income people file civil rights lawsuits. And $175,000 went to start a grant program that pays for security systems, doorbell cameras, and safety equipment for women living alone in high-crime areas. Danielle gave interviews to local news stations. She was calm, articulate, and focused on the bigger picture. She talked about how important it was to document everything when dealing with police. She talked about knowing your rights. She talked about the courage of the other women who had come forward. She also talked about the good officers she had worked with in her years as a forensic nurse. She made it clear that this wasn't about all police. It was about accountability. It was about making sure that predators couldn't hide behind badges. The criminal case against Bradley Mitchell went to trial 8 months later. He was convicted on 11 counts. The judge sentenced him to 38 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 25 years. During the sentencing hearing, all 3 victims who had been assaulted gave impact statements. They talked about the trauma, the fear, the violation of having someone they were supposed to trust attack them in their own homes. Danielle didn't give a statement at Mitchell's sentencing. She had never been physically assaulted by him, but she sat in the courtroom every day of the trial to support the other victims. After the sentencing, one of the victims, a woman named Jennifer, approached Danielle outside the courthouse. She hugged her and said something that Danielle still thinks about. "You saved my life, not just because you stopped him from hurting more people, but because you showed me that we could fight back, that we could win, that we didn't have to be afraid anymore." The Seattle Police Department implemented all the reforms the judge ordered. They created an independent review board specifically for sexual misconduct allegations. They implemented automatic flag systems in the database to identify officers who were searching for personal information without legitimate case reasons. They required all officers to use body cameras during any contact with the public, even wellness checks and noise complaints. They created mandatory training on recognizing and reporting predatory behavior by fellow officers. The department also reached out to the 3 women who had filed anonymous complaints before Danielle's incident. They apologized. They offered to reopen the investigations with full support and resources. 2 of the women agreed to make formal statements, which led to additional charges against Mitchell. Danielle continued working as an ER nurse. She got promoted to a lead position in the trauma unit. She still works the same brutal shifts. She still saves lives regularly. But now she also gives talks at police academies, nursing schools, and community centers about documentation, evidence collection, and knowing your rights. She shows the audio recording from that night. She shows her doorbell camera footage, the clear video of Mitchell's face, his body language, his threats. She walks people through exactly what she did and why. Her message is always the same. Stay calm, ask questions, document everything. Don't be afraid to call 911 even if police are already there. Know your rights, trust your instincts. The doorbell camera footage is still used in training. Law enforcement agencies across the country show it as an example of what happens when officers abuse their authority. They show it as a cautionary tale about how one wrong decision can end a career and a life. But they also show Danielle's response as an example of how civilians should protect themselves, how asking questions is an obstruction, how documentation is power, how staying calm can save your life. Ryan, Danielle's neighbor who recorded everything on his doorbell camera, still lives across the hall. They're good friends now. He jokes that he's her unofficial security guard, though Danielle points out that she's the one with combat experience. The Meridian Apartments encouraged all residents to install doorbell cameras after the incident, offering a discount program through a security company. The management sent a letter to all residents about their rights when police come to their doors and the importance of video documentation. Bradley Mitchell is currently serving his sentence at Washington State Penitentiary. He filed an appeal claiming the search of his computers was unconstitutional. The appeal was denied. He's filed 2 more appeals since then, both denied. He'll be eligible for parole when he's 68 years old. Based on the severity of his crimes and the fact that he used his position as a police officer to commit them, it's unlikely he'll ever be released. Danielle rarely talks about that night anymore. She doesn't want to be defined by it. She's a trauma nurse. That's her identity. That's her calling. But when she does talk about it, in interviews or at training sessions, she always emphasizes one thing. She wasn't special. She wasn't a lawyer or a cop or someone with inside knowledge. She was just a nurse who had worked with law enforcement enough to know that something was wrong, who trusted her instincts, who documented everything, who stayed calm under pressure. Any person can do what she did. Know your rights, ask questions, record everything, call 911 if something feels wrong. Don't open the door just because someone has a badge. Final question for you. Do you have a security camera or doorbell camera? If this story convinced you to get one, type yes in the comments. This story matters because it shows that predators exist everywhere, even in positions of authority. It shows that trusting your instincts is important. It shows that documentation can save your life. Danielle Moore wasn't trying to be a hero. She was just trying to sleep after a brutal shift at the hospital. But because she asked questions, because she documented everything, because she trusted that something was wrong, she stopped a serial predator and potentially saved dozens of women from being assaulted. One closed door, one audio recording, one doorbell camera, one neighbor's camera, one 911 call. 11 years of a police career ended, 38 years of prison time, $575,000 in damages, 3 organizations funded to help survivors, department-wide policy changes, and countless women protected from a predator who hid behind a badge. That's the power of staying calm. That's the importance of documentation. That's what happens when someone trusts their instincts and refuses to be intimidated, even by someone in uniform. Thanks for watching this story all the way through. If this opened your eyes or taught you something important, make sure you're subscribed for more stories like this. Drop a comment about whether you would have opened the door or stayed inside like Danielle did. And share this with someone who needs to know they have the right to ask questions, even when a cop is at their door. I'll see you in the next one.